Welcome, strangers, to Talkumentary, a show where we watch documentaries and get together and talk about them.
All right, hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of Talkumentary. This is where we all get together and we ignore the no trespassing signs. We collectively agree that as long as we can get together and talk just like we're doing right now, we're going to be completely fine. And if you can pepper in a little skateboarding in there for those of us that skate, that's going to be helpful as well. My name is Jeff. I am your host. Today I am in the Talkumentary den. I am joined by Brice, and the juice is loose, goose, fruit, Brice. Yep. Hi, Brice. What's up? Mr. Matt, what's up, buddy?
Hey.
And listeners, friends, we are joined this evening over the wonderful invention called the World Wide Web by a very special guest. He is an Omaha / Council Bluffs / this area native, recently transplanted to someplace up in Michigan, right? Somewhere up in the mitten. He's been skateboarding for a whole bunch of years. He's also a very educated fella, so we thought he was perfect for this episode. Even after all these years, he's still skating. He is a dear friend of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Travis King. Travis.
Hey there.
What's up,
How
man?
are you?
Thanks for being here, buddy.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Glad you could make this happen. How's the family? How's Phyllis and Penny, and how's Michigan?
Beautiful. Although it just snowed today, even though it was 90 degrees 2 days ago, but it just snowed like this morning. So
I hate that. I don't like that at all. Well, give Phyllis a hug for me. Travis, why don't we talk a little bit about why you're here? Skateboarding, right? Skateboarding was the main reason why I thought of you to join us here. What is skateboarding to you? How long have you been doing it? Tell us a little bit about you and skateboarding. Don't hold back, my friend.
Let's see. At this point, it's getting close to 30 years of skateboarding. I haven't stopped really ever. I've had some lulls as far as
Sure.
maybe only skating a couple times a week.
Yeah.
But it was mid 90s when I started skateboarding.
Who were the big names when you were skating?
So I can tell you, I knew a little bit because my brother's 8 years older than me, and he skateboarded in the old school into the new school kind of style of skateboarding.
Yep.
And so I had some of the all the Powell Peralta dudes, first Animal Chin video. That was probably the first skate video I ever saw, but I was probably 4 or 5 years old. But
Yeah.
it's
How many bones have you broken?
I have honestly only messed up my femur a little bit. I tore my ACL.
Is that a thing? You could just mess up a femur a little bit?
Well, it was like a fracture, but the more the damage was actually done because the ligament had nothing left to hold on to there.
Oh, ouch.
But that's the only major injury.
Yeah. If you couldn't tell, he was knocking on wood. That's what that was. So what kept you doing it after all these? I mean, we'll get into a little more about your history with skating and some of the other things that came up in this documentary. But why are you still doing it, man? You're an old man now.
Probably two things. One, it's just the joy of learning things. Still learning tricks even now. I'm surprised that I can still do that sometimes. And then spite.
Spite.
Pure and utter spite. For whether it's my body telling me I can't do something, or myself, or just others. There's so many tricks, especially early on, I learned because the people I skateboarded were at least a year older than me.
Yeah.
If not a lot. And there were some dudes in that group that just wanted to be shitheads and kind of haze. And if they told me I couldn't do a trick, I'd have the next day just to be an asshole.
Yeah, so you felt like maybe you had something to prove to the older kids kind of deal at the early stages, and then maybe sort of fell in love with it there.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So again, this is something we can get into a little bit deeper. If you're comfortable sharing, in this documentary, skateboarding, you know, among other things, was kind of an escape for some of these guys. For those of our listeners who maybe haven't seen the documentary yet, I would recommend you go watch it before listening to this. But was it an escape for you? Was it a way to get away from stuff, or was it just kind of like, hey, I'm bored and I'm going to go hang out with my friends, or maybe a little bit of both?
Like it'd be a fair amount of both. It's one of those things that, and I'm sure as we talk more about the documentary itself, like it's easy to not notice the crap you're in when you're in it.
Yeah.
And so obvious, like there's this escapism to it, sure. And, but it's something that distracted me enough from other things that I like, whether that was just basic demands of school or
Sure.
family life or just any other things that I probably obsessed over as a kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, like there's the exploration side of it. The documentary doesn't really go into that, but like, I definitely say that's another thing that's kept me in it so long, is just an excuse to see different, whether it's different cities or different parts of your city and the nooks and crannies.
Yeah. One of the things that I always thought was cool, and I skated for, you know, some years in high school and shortly after. I nowhere to the amount. I mean, for me, it was more of a, my friends are doing it and it's cool and I want to hang out with my friends, so I'm going to do the best I can to try to stay on this fucking thing and not hurt myself too badly. I did love it. But what I liked was with this little, like 1 foot by 3 foot, no, not even 1 foot by 1.5 2 foot board, you can take it with you everywhere and go see some of the, you know, little nooks and crannies, the dark alleys of cities that you're in. I thought was kind of neat. Brice, Matt, talk to me. You guys skateboarding. Is this Brice? I know you've got some skating history. What is this something that you're interested in?
You see, I'm wearing my Vans right now.
Me too. See,
so that high school kids will think that I can skate.
Except for when we were in high school, or when I was in high school, it was the world's chunkiest like Globe or DC skate shoes.
Yeah, Etnies. Yeah, those DCs.
Those are back.
They're back.
Gross.
Not Etnies explicit. Well, I can't remember, but they've redone some S's. And that was like a
S. Yeah.
The chunky looks kind of back at the moment.
Yeah, and Crocs are a thing too.
For skating?
Oh, I hope not. But
I hope Crocs take over the skate scene.
I've seen someone skate in Crocs.
You have?
I have.
Gross.
Yes.
All right, keep going, Brice. Didn't mean to cut you off there, friend.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my skating experience is from Tony Hawk, Pro Skater 2, obviously.
The video game, not the man.
Yeah, not the man.
Okay, yeah.
No, he had nothing to do with it.
The best soundtrack of a video game to date, I think. Matt, is this something? Does this appeal to you at all, or did you just get roped into this?
I had lots of friends that were skaters, and they did that thing, and that was kind of my crowd hanging out with them. But no, I was the guy that sat on the skateboard and went down the hill. I wasn't good.
Fair enough.
I wasn't good enough to do the tricks.
Yeah. I didn't do many tricks. I could stand on it all right, but that's all right. All right, so we all got together this evening. We roped Mr. King into this for a fun, but kind of in a lot of ways heartbreaking, thought-provoking 93-minute documentary called Minding the Gap.
Take one. I'm making this film because I saw myself in your story.
I always felt like I didn't fit in with my family.
My parents ran this very controlling house. I ran away a lot.
Skateboarding is more of a family than my family. Life might be moving too fast.
We have to fully grow up, and it's gonna suck. When you're a kid, you just do, you just act. And then somewhere along the line, everyone loses that.
I knew you had some huge weight on you. Skateboarding meant more to you. It was kind of a life or death thing.
I remember hearing screaming coming from your room, and it was like really really unnerving.
One of the last things I said to my dad was that I hate you.
You can't just have a child and abandon them. Life doesn't work like that.
I just don't want him to grow up like me. I just want to hide. I just want to run away. That's what the drinking is about.
Maybe you're right. Maybe I need to just move on.
I wish you could. I wish that I could do over.
I could seriously be on the verge of having a mental breakdown, but as long as I'm able to go skate, I'm completely fine.
This was a 2018 documentary that follows the filmmaker Bing Liu as he and a few of his closest friends, Zach, Kier, is that how they were pronouncing it? Kier, yeah. As they bond through skateboarding to escape their volatile family lives and then into their early adult lives as they face adult responsibilities, unexpected revelations, and a whole lot of kind of pain and emotions as they go through life. Let's talk about some accolades. This documentary was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award for Best Documentary Feature, a Truer Than Fiction Award, Critics' Choice Award, and an Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature, which is a pretty big nomination to get. It was named one of the top documentaries by the National Board of Review. It won a 2018 Peabody Award. It won the New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Nonfiction Film. It was certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with a 100% tomato meter with 129 reviews and an audience score of 91% with over 500 ratings. Directed, produced, edited, filmed, and starring Bing Liu. Also produced by Diane Moy Kwan. Also starring Kiera Johnson and Zach Mulligan and a whole bunch of other friends of theirs. This film was an ITVS, Cardam Quinn Films, and POV American documentary production, distributed by Hulu and Magnolia Pictures, streamed on Hulu. All right, let's talk about why we chose to watch Minding the Gap this week. Brice, you chose this one.
I sure did.
You did.
Good job.
If it sounds like that's news to you, but
a lot of things are.
Yeah. Why did we watch Minding the Gap this week?
Well, because skating is cool. It's always been cool. And if there's a documentary about it, why not watch it?
Travis, what interested you about this documentary before you even started watching it? You had mentioned when I talked to you earlier that this was one of the few skateboarding related documentaries that you probably hadn't seen at the time. Was it just because it was another skating one, or what interested you about this one?
I think the other one I'd seen came out after this one, and it's the one of, like, I forget, I think it's like All the Lights in the City or something like that. And it's about hip hop and skateboarding in New York.
Nice.
And I think that's Hulu as well.
Taking a note
and
of that.
I thought this one was it. When I watched that one about hip hop, and then I realized, no, it's not the same one, but because of Hulu, I think put that out as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I knew I'd wanted to see this one because I saw some of the hype around it, and given some of the things that I teach and stuff like that, it had this good intersection between my interest in skateboarding and also socio-political issues as far as that goes.
Talk to me about that. What do you teach? Tell me why that's interesting to you.
I teach American government and public policy at the University of Nebraska. And I also do like research methods as well. And as far as the policy side, it's not just the laws as far as that, but the way things are enforced and the way, how do we achieve our goals that we set out as a collective to do that? And a big question is, are we? What are we doing with these tax funds? What are these laws accomplishing? And so I had a feeling from some of the images I had seen a while ago that would be in this one.
Yeah.
And it just fell under the radar at the time when it did actually come out, because I remember seeing it, and I, like, when you said it was 2018, I was like, holy, I had definitely fell under the radar for a minute. So
yeah. Matt, what about you? This was interesting to you, or did this just because I put it on your list?
No, it was very interesting to me. I mean, aside from the skateboarding, which seemed to be a main topic, obviously. I mean, these guys were living a lifestyle that was kind of like what I was doing and when I was their age. And, it kind of hit close to home, and it was cool to see.
Cool. Yeah. We'll get into that a little bit. The only thing about what you just said that I would argue after watching this, I don't know that this was about skateboarding.
Right.
This documentary was very much about, obviously we'll get into it, but about the relationships these kids had, not only with each other and with their families, but with themselves, and sort of the realizations of life and whatnot. And skateboarding was just what grounded them, or at least what the filmmakers decided to make the focal point. Maybe it's kind of what brought them together. But I thought it was I was super interested. The thought that something so, and I put this in air quotes, something so simple, kind of in theory simple, quote unquote, like riding a little board with wheels on it. If you've ever been on a skateboard, it's not simple, but the concept is fairly simple, right? It's not, it's a board on wheels. But it can bring together so many different types of people from different backgrounds and cultures and upbringings and things like that. And kind of create a bond that can only be understood by the people who do it, which is, similar in a lot of ways to people, Travis, like who have played in bands, or people who ride mopeds or motorcycles, which Travis is also a moped guy. So, thoughts on that, Trav?
As far as it's interesting because on one hand, I don't think you have to be a skateboarder to get something out of this, but I think
Agreed.
If you are a skateboarder, you're going to get more than the average person, I would say. Sure. Like, I would add that I think if you're a skateboarder that got into skateboard, are probably at least 20 to 25 years old right now,
mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot more that makes a lot more sense in those experiences, just because with skateboarding becoming more popular, you're seeing a lot more people probably from better adjusted families getting into it. I would say.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. I think the sort of it coming from the, I don't know, lack of a better word, but sort of grunge or the maybe not grunge, but the Lords of Dogtown kind of style. That world, whether it's surfers who wanting something to do to then being more accessible in the you bring it into the world of media, like Tony Hawk's games that got so popular, and then TV shows, and all the guys who are on Jackass were skateboarders, or at least a lot of them were, and just inundating that into pop culture, and then making it something where it's not so much it's maybe not as niche as it was at one point. I think that was pretty good. Did we have predictions going into this before we watched it? What were your thoughts? And maybe I'll start. I expected a story of friendship, kind of bonds that kind of all spin around the wheel of a skateboard, because it all kind of goes back to skateboarding. And I was surprised after that prediction, because of the turmoil that was in these kids' lives and the things that they, I guess I didn't expect the focus of this film to not be skateboarding. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
How hard it can be for some people to grow up was a big point going through this documentary. Was, whether it was Zach with his struggles with alcoholism and things like that, or it was Kier that was dealing with just getting out of the house and going and working and things where it was difficult for him. And then this is another documentary, just like the one we watched called The Work. This was another documentary that had a lot of focus on the fatherhood or the lack thereof, and what kind of role that can play in the life of a young kid. What What about you guys? Predictions before you watched it, and did the predictions live up to truth? Trav, we'll start with you.
I think I wasn't surprised by what I ended up seeing in it particularly, but there's a lot of raw stories that come out of skateboarding, like as far as that, like if you've heard of the Pappas brothers, check that out. As far as the story of these two brothers, that it's just insane. People are familiar with Bam Margera and some of the trials he's had with fame, but also just other stuff. But then there's people like Terry Kennedy, and there's there's a laundry list of people, and there's some great stories and fascinating stories about these people from skateboarding that aren't just stories of triumph, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think it kind of opens a world to almost like I may this may not come out right, but sort of like a conduit into triumph to people who may not have the same, maybe not set up as well onto a trajectory of success. Like even Kier in this, we find out, spoiler alert, we find out toward the end that he did go on to be, whether it was a sponsored or pro skater of some sort, and to some success in that world, even though he came up with a broken home with some turmoil in his life and some abuse and trauma and things like that. I think it's always fun when there's whether it's an art form or a extracurricular sport of some sort that sort of gives someone who maybe wasn't set up, either financially, economically, however they were brought up onto a trajectory for success. Matt, any thoughts before going into that? I mean, what was your...
I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched the trailer of it, and it to me looked like it was about to be a documentary focusing on skateboarding.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I took it.
So there was some surprise after you watched it?
Yeah, there were a lot of surprises.
Yeah. Cool. Brice, anything to add?
Yeah.
All right, moving on. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, no, I got nothing. Yeah, I thought it was going to be, centered around skateboarding, and I thought it was just going to be like, over the course of a year, these kids in high school and going on to college and stuff. But the amount of time that it was filmed, and you can see these kids like growing up from all of the footage, Bing, yeah, yep. Bing threw in like throughout the whole thing. I was like, oh my God, this is a lifetime.
Yeah.
Like,
he's been working on this since they were real little. Yeah.
And I was, that blew my expectations away, just seeing that and how well it played out. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved that. I love when a documentary can use the timeline, the footage, the actual real, experience from an early age. And then, you watch in an hour and a half, you watch a documentary, you watch the story of something he's been putting together for 15 years or something like that, or even longer. I love that. That's such a good way to tell a story. It's not like, hey, I have this idea to make this documentary today, and then next month, well, obviously it takes longer than that, but you've got a complete documentary. No, this is a labor of love and a true, this is your life. You're putting that stuff together.
Oh, if I don't want to interrupt. As far as what's interesting is this dynamic of the fact all this time that's put into filming this is very much, it's like, this is one of those things where I said for a lot of skateboarders, there'd be a lot of things you can see and be familiar with. So many skateboarders are documentarians by nature, by virtue of the sport. How you get famous and get any attention in skateboarding is via clips. And that's ironically all the more true in the social media era than it's ever been.
Yeah, because you don't have to buy a camera anymore and bring it with you and risk damaging it. No, everyone's got a camera that's better than what Bing was using early on.
but at the same time, there's no skateboarder that's going to probably listen to this or that's going to watch this documentary that doesn't have a friend who has a video camera. More than likely, it's few and far between. And if your friend doesn't have one, there's someone who's at that park that you've met or you skateboarded with.
Yeah,
that is more than willing to. If you're modestly decent, you're going to have documentation of your experiences.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Spike Jones, for reference, it started out in skateboarding.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Wow. That's cool. All right. So let's get into some of our least favorite details about Minding the Gap. Let's pick it apart just a little bit. But before we do that, I'm going to give kind of a fairly quick and dirty synopsis for the documentary. Minding the Gap takes place primarily around the town of Rockford, Illinois, in the American Rust Belt. It uses a decade worth of footage that the filmmaker Bing Liu had been accumulating, as Brice said, over the years with his friends, as they do exactly what teenagers do. They get into trouble, they cause a little mayhem, they climb a few buildings, and they do a whole hell of a lot of skateboarding. Main characters here being Bing, Kier, Zach, and those are the three that are credited often when you're looking up anything. I would argue that Zach's on again, off again lady Nina was just as much a part of this story as anything else, and his son, but she was a big player here too. So they kind of finally reached the age of adulthood, and this documentary shows some of the struggles each person has trying to adapt to those to life. Over the course of the film, hardships from each of the kids' pasts, as well as their new adult responsibilities, start to surface. Zach becoming a new father and dealing with difficulties in his relationship with Nina, Kier having to support himself as a dishwasher, a failed business venture to create an indoor skate park. Probably in my opinion, the heaviest sort of underlying facet to this documentary is the reveal that all the boys grew up in what would be considered an abusive home. Kier explains being disciplined by his overly strict father in ways that, as he said, would be called child abuse now. Zach develops what seems like a pretty severe drinking problem throughout this the footage, I guess. He reminisces about getting his ass whooped as a kid and writing it off as something that happened to everyone after his father held him to impossibly high standards. Bing also reveals that his stepfather was a real piece of shit and held him to such high standards and impossible standards, and often resulted in some fairly significant violence in their house. Probably the most gut-wrenching part of this for me was when he confronted his mother.
100%.
Yeah, that was difficult for me to watch. It was a heartbreaking scene. Even Nina, again, the fourth main character here, as I said, was Zach's on-again, off-again girlfriend, the mother of his son. She reports a chaotic and distant family that left her feeling secluded and alone often as she grew up. Through the years of hardship that were documented in this film, it does end with some postscript footage revealing that the kids have continued to grow up, I guess. Zach was promoted at work. He's paying child support to Nina, and she has her own apartment with their son, Elliot, pursuing her own career. Kier found a job in Denver and moved away from Illinois, eventually becoming a sponsored skateboarder. Bing was able to give his mother away to a new marriage, which was super sweet. And as we have seen, he has pursued his filmmaking career. He's done a couple different documentaries and films. I don't have them in my notes, so sorry, Bing, if you're listening to this. But still, go check out his stuff. Throughout the film, the one grounding point that keeps coming back is the love and connection to skateboarding. Travis, man, let's start with you. The standout moment, man. Like, let's just dive right in. When if someone were to ask you tomorrow, hey, have you seen Minding the Gap? Okay, actually, let me pause for a second. Why is this called Minding the Gap? What the hell does that mean?
Are you asking me specifically or everybody?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm curious of what others are going to say first. So I want to see what they thought when they heard this.
Matt, let's jump to Matt. I have a feeling that Brice might have a good idea about it. Matt, do you know what that means? Because I sure
I'll take a wild stab at it, but I think minding the gap means that you're growing through the beginning stages of life. So the gap starts when you're young and when you're older. So you're kind of growing through the big gap in life.
Okay, Brice, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, there's a term like a gap in skateboarding, but it has nothing to do with that.
Okay,
because
all right, Trav?
Skateboarding has always been fashion forward, and where do you find fashion? At the gap.
Oh God!
So you got to mind the gap.
Oh my God!
That's
all
it.
right. So fall into the gap. That's Brice's get. Travis, why don't you tell us? I have a feeling that
I got nothing to add. Brice nailed it.
Okay, fair enough. All right, moving on. My thought is that this probably has a link to what Matt said, and also to what you would consider a gap in skateboarding, and maybe a little bit of play on words where you're, So, Trav, why don't you give the? I don't know how else to say that.
Between you and Matt, I think that's where I would have went. Is obviously you have the term a gap, like it's a distance between objects, whether it's like it could be something raised or a pit or something, but you got to clear X amount of distance,
right?
To
generally on a skateboard, correct?
Task on a skateboard,
right?
And so that's what we mean when we say a gap. And then the kind of the minding it, like you have this growth side of it. I think there's a lot of gaps that were being played with it. Yeah. There's the age gap between Kier and his friends that he's skateboarding with.
Yep.
That's leading to different experiences. There's the race gap that's happening there. There's even though there's this common thread of abuse, there's also the different types of abuse that we suffered and the differences in that. And then I think there's also the kind of the gap in personal experience and collective experience,
right?
And that kind of happening. And so I've all the stuff that I saw, all the clips that I saw on it, make me think that was all part of all the multiple gaps that are kind of being thought of there.
Yep. And don't they also say to mind the gap when you get onto like a subway train as well?
It's common in England, the tube, and I think there could be an element because that's if you don't mind it, you could get yourself killed.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So so go ahead.
I would like to change my answer slightly.
Okay.
That maybe the gap is, they're skateboarding, and then what else is happening in between those times they're skateboarding is the gap.
That's great. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I like
that.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Because I feel like it always comes back to they find like their peace and like everything when they're skating, and then they
Brice,
go back into this tumultuous life.
Brice.
Damn it.
And then they go down to the gap and they get 50% off. Buy one, get one.
The amount successful now.
Yeah, the amount of gap between your first answer and your second answer is just astronomical anyway. So, all right, Travis, back to you, my friend. What stood out? Someone says, "Did you watch Mind the Gap?" Which we all know why it's named that now. What's the thing that just pops right into your head? And
so
why?
You had already touched on one of about the three different things I have in mind, and that was obviously like that scene is probably the harshest to watch where Bing confronts his mother.
Yeah.
That said, I think coming back to kind of the interest that I mentioned, the dueling interest both in skateboarding and just education and teaching about politics and understanding politics and government and policy explicitly is very much the scene where I think they finally really weighed in that they're going to be talking about this like childhood trauma and abuse.
Yeah.
And then it starts talking about domestic violence and listing domestic violence statistics for Rockford, Illinois, and just the nation in general.
Yeah.
And all the while they're honing in on a sign that says no skateboarding allowed.
Yeah. And talk to me about that. Did you feel like there was an intentional connection between him showing that sign immediately after them saying Rockford was one of the worst, one of the most violent cities?
Yeah, if it wasn't intentional, that is the broadest stroke of luck in filmmaking ever, at least from my perspective. But I wouldn't be the first person to read, and it wouldn't be the first time that I've read more meaning into something, but I'm pretty confident on this one. That said, it's like, for me, it was just that juxtaposition. And it was like, because there's a bunch being said in that. One, for me, is just the irony of, okay, so we're really worried here about people skateboarding instead of when all these other things.
There's a lot of things we should probably be more worried about. Yeah.
Like, you have that. And then you also have, like, you're also, not only are you more worried about that, you're also suggesting we take away these escapes from people that are suffering these things.
Right. Yeah. And that's the piece that I took the most. I know you mentioned that piece to me when we talked earlier last week, or later last, whatever it was, whenever we talked last. And, that kind of dawned on me was, it's the same kind of concept when people start talking, and we're not going to get into this one, so no one jump at me when I say this, but it's the same concept when you talk about, gun control, right? Is it going to become more violent if you put more gun problems if you start taking more restrictions on it, or the opposite, or when or like cannabis use, right? Do you have more drug problems when you restrict it so much and criminalize it so much versus when you don't? And for that one specifically, you end up, I think it has been shown in a lot of ways that some of that eases up. So that's an interesting way to put it, or way to think about it, I guess. Matt, what about you, man? What's one of your standout moments? Something you loved or hated about this film?
Well, I don't know if I have a love or a hate for it, but one thing that came to mind was, throughout the entire movie, there was only one cop car that drove by, didn't stop. And when you think about skateboarding, that doesn't happen. You're always getting harassed by the cops, or at least that's how it's portrayed in the movies. And at least that was my experience with my friends. Yeah. When we were always in places, we weren't supposed to be, the cops were always around. So
yeah. Travis, thoughts? Did you take anything about that?
I actually didn't notice that. So it's got me curious as far as random related things. Like, yeah, I mean, security guards, you get hassled by more than anything.
Yeah.
As an adult, you learn how
security and whatnot.
Yeah, you learn how to deal with them and have conversations as an adult. As a young kid, you can be a bit of a hothead. That said, I had to spend time in GUV for trespassing for skateboarding a public pool.
Hey, nice. Hey, that's a badge of honor, man. Brice, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that stood out to me was the scene where the security guard kicks the board out while he's trying to do a grind.
I guess there was
because I had seen that clip before. But then seeing it in here, I was like, oh, it's part of the documentary.
Yeah, God. Go ahead, Trev.
I have the perfect tie-in as an adult, actually, because the new Kiewit building in downtown Omaha, they built it's near the Saddle Creek complex and all that in North downtown. It's not far from where I was living in Omaha. And when it got built, it has this really great spot. And I was like, I'm going to go check it out. And I'm skating it, and it's right at the entrance. And as I'm skating it, no one's come out or said anything to me yet. There's no signs posted. And I literally get rushed up from behind, this guy trying to shove me in the back while I'm rolling. And I had to turn around as an adult with him, and ask him. You do realize that probably exposed you, maybe to more liability, shoving me than asking me to just leave, because I could have been injured because of your action.
Yeah, that is such a that is such a Travis King way to deal with that situation. Let me talk to you about how that could have been a problem.
Well, believe it or not, we had about another hour-long conversation after that. Because I asked him legitimately, I was like, have you explicitly been told to kick out skateboarders? And he's like, no. I was like, so why are you doing this?
Why are you doing? So Brice, if you're a 16-year-old kid and you get hit in that same situation, how do you handle that? Do you handle it as eloquently as Mr. King did?
Like me personally?
Yeah.
Oh, I just kind of shut down in those situations.
Oh, okay. You're like, I'm sorry, I'll leave.
Growing up in Hordeville, a town of about 160 people, the closest thriving metropolis was Central City, and Central City had it. Oh, it's
where?
It's out there. Anyways, Central City had a curfew that if you were under 18, you couldn't be out. And I was 17 at the time. We got in trouble with the cops because one of my friends at the time was throwing street signs and going kind of crazy, yelling crazy things. And he was the adult in the situation.
Yeah.
Anyways, the cops were like checking our IDs or whatever. And they found out that I was 17. And they're like, we're going to drive you home. Where do you live? And I was like, Hordeville. And they're like, we're not going to drive you home. that is not worth our time. You guys walk back.
And we're taking your boards.
Yeah. So that was, that as a young man, I just kind of shut down. And then, if the cops, if it's too much for them, they just don't want to deal with it. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose so. So the, in the film, the catalyst, I think, or the sort of what set up these guys' friendships was skateboarding. Trav, did you experience that? Was that your friend group? Is that where you found friendship and connection? And if so, like, are you still close to any of those people?
Yeah, I mean, like for Claire, like for one obvious person, Christopher Beam, who was also in ties.
I like Beam.
Me and I, like me and Beam knew each other. We knew each other actually since elementary and through BMX biking, but we didn't really hang out because he was a year older than me. But it was through skateboarding after that, like in junior high into high school, that he became part of a group. But he was that group that was a year older. That some of those dudes were super kind of up. I'm going to say uptight.
Yeah,
for
sure.
skateboarders, they were uptight. Beam was not, but yeah, but I had a lot of dudes that were in my grade that also skateboarded, and a couple dudes that were a year younger than me that also skateboarded. Yeah. And I would say Beam's the longest standing. Then there's a friend that went to a different high school that I met during high school through skateboarding. He's still a really, really good friend. He's in a different city as well at this point. He's in Rapid City, South Dakota. But
so these friendships that form, and this is for the guys in the room too. How important is finding that connection? I mean, skateboarding was it for Travis. It sounds like. Matt, what was your connection? Where did you find your people, and how impactful was that in your life?
I played a lot of sports.
Which sports?
Soccer, baseball, basketball. Up until I was about 12 years old, and then I turned into a computer nerd.
Yeah, and there's community there, man.
Well, the old bulletin board systems and all the social media before it became social media.
Yeah,
chat rooms before people knew about chat rooms. Just that was my world. I was immersed in the world of technology.
And does that still do any of your connections from then live on in your life?
And it's funny you mentioned that, because I happen to be the technology IT guy for my place of work, and I love it.
Yeah. But what about I guess specifically the friends, the people that you built?
Yeah. So I some of the people that I developed relationships on, especially when I was just learning how to do the things that I know. We still talk today, and some of them, I reach out to every once in a while, and we, we talk about the things, because a lot of us are still in the field of technology, and we talk about our careers.
Yeah, Brice, what was the catalyst in your life, or is there something?
Oh man, I'd say a lot of my like longest term friendships were built around just church from back in the day.
Yeah.
Which then developed into Halo 2.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
And then LAN parties.
Same thing, right?
Yeah,
Church
buddy.
and Halo 2.
Yeah. And then that turned into YouTube videos and then going to college and
yeah.
And then
now paintball.
And then them all having kids and growing up, and then now I just play paintball. It's a good time.
When do you start that process? I'm just kidding.
I've seen enough people do it. It's, you know, it's not
rough,
for everybody.
Yeah. You know, and just to add in to my experience there, because I know everyone's just wanting to know, it was music, playing in bands. And I mean, to this day, the people that I played in bands with are some of the people that I'm the closest to in my life. And I guess the reason I'm asking these questions is because this documentary really, I felt a connection because no matter, so I'll try not to get too tangent here, but no matter how much these guys struggled, they were still, at least in some way, shape, or form, to the way that they were capable of being, still a pillar in each other's lives. And, you know, even Nina and Zach, who were at odds with each other with their relationship, they were still somewhat there for each other throughout. And, you know, I guess I don't know how close they are today, but I can't imagine that a friendship going back that long and being that, you know, I have a very, very close friend of mine that is currently going through some very difficult things with addiction, which have got him into trouble, some domestic violence issues, some incarceration issues. And this is someone who I, for the longest time, and still consider to be a brother of mine. And it is so hard to try to I guess, balance the line of, you know, when we saw Zach going through some of his issues and Bing trying to figure out, how do I confront him about the things that I knew that he, or that I've heard that he did that were wrong, bad to another friend of mine. And where does this become, you know, and there's no right, wrong answer here. This is for everyone to, I think, reflect on themselves, but it just creates such a crazy kind of dichotomy, or you know, just a strange mixture of emotions when you talk about a friendship that is so rooted into who you are, and having to watch somebody go through something or do something you're not okay with, and where, you know, knowing that you can't be okay with something, but then still trying to be a supportive person as well. I know that was a lot for me to just say, but that was something that hit me kind of on an emotional level when I watched this, that stood out to me, that I didn't really expect to stand out to me as much as it did. And maybe this was a tiny piece of this film, but that was what kind of hit me the hardest.
I think it's a bigger piece than you think might be giving it credit for, because it's I think it connects that part of the personal experience to the collective experience that painted the whole time. Like, as far as that, like, if we can't learn how to communicate those things, how do we expect to improve the situation that he just rambled, like listed all these facts about it in society at large? Yeah. And so that said, and also there's a thousand real there for the two friends I mentioned. I probably have about 8 others that did not make it past substance abuse. Let's put it that way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's all related to, these are all people I know through skateboarding. So
I hate to get a little personal here, but
do it if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, well, not myself necessarily, but, you know, having watched Minding the Gap and seeing what they went through and kind of where the problems of substance abuse began with a lot of these people, was the fact that they didn't have a fatherly figure in their life. Now, my question to the 3 of you skaters in this room: did you have that figure in your life? Did you have a father figure in your life?
I was fortunate enough. Yes, I have actually 2 fairly strong father figures in my life.
Yeah.
So, and I don't take that for granted a day in my life, because especially as we start watching these documentaries and the people that I know in my life who have struggled, you know, whether it's it doesn't necessarily need to be a man. It doesn't necessarily need to be you know, whatever that may be, but the solid foundations from growing up, you know, and I think that I feel
parental guidance.
Yeah. Whether it's from a biological parent or not, having that parental figure to keep you on that path. God damn. If we haven't been seeing in the last, you know, 7 documentaries that we've covered that's important.
Yeah.
It's fucking important.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, there's no mistake. Brice, what about you?
I mean, I'm not saying I'm a bad skater, but yeah, my dad's been around, and it's been great having his guidance growing up, and I've kept out of trouble and all that.
Yeah. For the most part.
Right.
For the most part. Yeah.
So this is where I told you to get real. Like on one end, I want to be very clear. My father's a functioning alcoholic. I never wanted for anything as far as monetarily. Like I would say, we were lower middle class, but I never worried about that. But as to paint 2 vivid stories of the similarities with some of the characters in that is I can remember, I can't remember if it's 8th grade or 9th grade. I think it's 8th grade. I woke up to I lived far enough away from school that I had to get a ride or ride the bus. I always get a ride. And my dad was usually the person who gave me that ride. But when I woke up to take a shower in the morning, the door was half open to the front of the house because he was passed out in his own vomit.
Oh.
And yeah. And I still had to get a ride from that individual. So the icing on that story, not realizing I probably shouldn't have asked for that ride, but having ridden in a vehicle enough time when he has been drunk, I figured he's at least sober enough. But he goes around a corner in his pickup that the tailgate's off of, but in the bed, and the tailgate goes out in the middle of Broadway of Council Bluffs.
Oh my gosh.
He proceeds to back up and then tell me to lift up his tailgate.
Wow. That's scary, man.
I have some humility about it. Like the other story that goes with skateboarding with that is I lived close to the spot everyone skateboarded in Council Bluffs. And so we go to my place and watch skate videos. But the one thing I had to do every time, because the number of my friends that have seen my father buck naked because he's passed out drunk.
Wow.
In the foyer that's right off the entry.
Right.
Like I had to get in the habit of making sure that door was closed before. And again,
yeah,
my dad wasn't a physically abusive ever, not at all.
Right.
Well, my parents absentee, very much so. Yeah. And alcoholism on my dad's side's a lot to do with that. Were they verbally abusive towards each other? Very much so. Yeah. I don't think he was ever physically abusive, but I don't know if I just tuned that stuff out. But
yeah.
And here's the irony of all this. The last point. Then sorry, Jeff.
No, you're good. You're fine.
Is like I said, my brother's 8 years older than me. My brother struggles with alcohol. I don't think he's near as bad as my dad. And then you have me. I don't know if I just learned the lessons by watching them, and I just didn't want to deal with their bullshit. I've never drank alcohol in my life.
Attaboy.
Yep.
Attaboy.
Skateboarding was the drug.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where I was just about to interject is, skateboarding for these guys, to kind of bring it back to our documentary a little bit. And Travis, thanks for sharing that stuff. Skateboarding is when the emotions accumulate, when it starts to build, the issues at home and all of that, even Kier was talking about when his dad passed away and it hit him harder than he thought it would. And he went to try to find his dad's grave and he was struggling to find it and he got real emotional about it. And then the emotions that he felt around that, those are just relationships that are so ingrained in who we are. And to see it, Travis, you were forced to play a parental role to your father. A therapist would have a heyday with that, and we've all probably dealt with some form of that in our lives. And Matt, you were asking the question, but I am interested in knowing where that question comes from, because I have a feeling there may be a story there as well. But when their emotions bubbled to that point, they went to skateboarding. And it sounds like it was similar to you, Travis. For me, maybe it was going and playing on the drums or something. Again, fortunate enough to, there is a little bit of alcoholism in my life. I also have not consumed alcohol. And that is for a reason. That's not just because it wasn't interesting to me. It's because I didn't want to turn out in a certain way, so there is something to be said about learning from other people's mistakes, as well as making, as Brice picks
Making
up his
your own.
IPA.
I'll drink to
that. Matt, do you want to share anything on that piece, or are you?
Well, it makes, what you're saying is that the foundation of having a father in life is supremely influential to having a sense of whole direction, right? Because you think of that feeling of having two parents in your life growing up, teaching you new things, and
Mm-hmm.
when you don't have one in the picture, you kind of grow up feeling like you missed out a little bit, or at least you can. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it just depends on the parents, but both of my parents were in my life for a long time, and
It's crazy thinking, as I get older and learn about people's backgrounds, and as a kid, you maybe don't consider other people's home lives, because you're just like, do you want to come over and play Sega Genesis or what? Like, you don't see that as much. But as I grow up and I go, God, I'm in the minority that I had two. I do come from divorce, but I had two from a very young age: a mom and a stepfather who loved and cared about me, and a dad and a stepmother who loved and cared about me. And both, was there flaws? Sure. It's humanity, right? But you have that foundation, and I didn't realize how lucky that makes me when you hear some of the stories that come out. So anyway,
did you get lots of presents at Christmas?
that was the fucking best part of the whole thing.
I'm gonna, if it comes up later, which it might, I'll tell you this: it's not just kids still that overlook thinking about other kids' situations. At the skate park as an adult these days, I see so many parents who do not know how to handle other people's kids when they're confronted.
Oh,
and it's I love and hate having to be the only real adult at any given skate park. It seems like.
I feel like, knowing you, Travis, I feel like you wear that hat well, though. So
I try.
Well
It depends
done.
on how caustic I'm feeling that day.
Yeah. Another thing to kind of tie into the chaos that can happen at home, especially the effect you can have as a kid when your brain's still developing and your emotions are still developing, you're kind of coming into your own. The thing about skateboarding is the control. Something, fairly inexpensive. Travis, you can probably attest to, there is some cost that goes into getting your setup, but more often than not, if you're like me, someone probably gave you your first skateboard because it was a hand-me-down or something like that. But this is something that I can control. And yeah, there's, you have to, and someone in the film said it, you have to control these minute details, these small little, when you watch someone on a skate film do a kickflip, for example, it looks effortless. But if you've ever done a kickflip, it is not effortless until that muscle memory, and even then, there is thought, there is control, there is, and these are minute things that the smallest difference or change in whatever is happening will cause a pretty frustrating amount of pain, whether you're slapping the concrete or you're taking a board to the shin or the ankle or something like that.
Credit card.
What's that?
Skateboarders, getting a credit card.
Explain a credit card, please.
And the board's vertical between your legs, and you're trying to put all your weight down on the ground.
Right in your perineum.
Yeah.
That's a taint if you don't know. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. Anyway, I do think that that's an interesting way to look at it. And I don't think that that's digging for depth. I think that that's a real thing. And it's not just skateboarding, but that's the focus of this documentary is having something in your life that you can control. When your emotions get to the point, everything's going to be fine if I can go skateboarding. Whether or not I'm doing a sick, trick or learning something new or just riding down the street with my buddies. Kier said, I get mad at skateboarding, but I can't stay mad at it. And then Bing says from behind the camera, but it hurts you. And Kier laughs and says, yeah, but so did my dad, but I love him to death. It's like, oh, that's kind of profound, Travis, to speak on that, some of my most vivid memories of skateboarding for the few years that I did it is the absolute blood boiling frustration that it can cause. Why do we keep coming back to it? I mean, I guarantee, I know that you are a fairly laid back person for most of the time, but you, I know, have a temper when it comes to that sort of stuff from time to time, and you. Hopefully, I'm not speaking out of turn by saying that.
You're not, and it's like, why stick with it despite the pain?
Is it spite, like you mentioned earlier?
Yeah,
Is it like, fuck you, I'm getting this?
To a certain extent, absolutely. I couldn't deny that, and there's also, I think, an evolution that happens with I would say most. I like the science part of my brain doesn't want to say this. The other part of my brain saying, in my experience, most of the skateboarders I know can get really frustrated when they get a trick, regardless of age. Yeah. I think I very much, as I came back to it much heavily, because like I said, I've never stopped, but in the past 3 years, I've been back at it heavy, where I'm probably skating 3 or 4 times a week.
Right.
And that's for an hour, sometimes 4 hours in a single day. And at this point, I don't really get frustrated. I'm confident enough to know I'm going to learn, I'm going to put in the work and to learn how to walk away or try something new. Where when I was younger, that definitely wasn't the case.
Yeah, that's a very adult way to handle a situation. Which you start learning that if you get caught up in it, you start putting too much thought, because there is this control, but you overthink things, right? And it takes time to consciously learn that habit. Yeah. And when I was younger, you asked earlier before, or you might have been recording, a favorite trick. Yeah. Well, it was still a kickflip, but there's this particular trick that I have this fundamental memory of that I spent 5 hours trying to kickflip a gap. Yeah. Behind this video store in Council Bluffs, all my friends there. At the 2 hour mark, I think most of them left because they maybe got a different trick or couldn't do anything over it. Or they're tired of watching you fall on your ass.
Yeah, and here's the thing is I never really ate ground, but the impact of my feet. I couldn't walk the next day. I didn't ever get the trick that day. The bottoms of my feet were black and blue. I could not fucking walk. And yeah, but I was frustrated that whole time, but I was not going to fucking give up on it. Yeah. I came back a week later when I could walk again and nailed it second try.
Yeah, you walk away from it and then it's easier. Yeah.
Yeah, enough of that process, you start learning, and it's one of those things that some people develop that way, some people don't, and I've seen my fair share of skateboarders that way. And to link it back to the documentary, it definitely seems like there's some characters that are likely to learn that, some maybe not, and there could be other things that are preventing that. But yeah, it's the spike's the other. I was going to spike that fucking trick until I did.
Yeah. Brice, how about you, man?
Something I do just in my mind when we're watching documentaries and stuff, it's which character do I relate to most?
Oh, that's an interesting.
And just right away in this one, I was like, Zach's great. He likes to party. He can't land a skate trick. He's climbing over fences, being like, I didn't see that trespassing sign. Yep. I was like, I relate with this guy so much. He's wearing Hawaiian shirts and bucket hats.
Yeah.
He's very fashion forward. He must shop at the Gap.
Yep. He minds the Gap all day.
And then as it progresses, I'm just like, Oh. No.
Zach, no.
No, don't do
I
that.
know a
Don't
lot
do
of dudes like Zach. I'm
Yeah,
going to say
yeah.
that in skateboarding.
Yeah. So that's interesting. My next note is kind of Zach and Nina's relationship specifically. And that's, I think, was the, I hate to put it this way, and I think the baby's name was Elliot. Elliot, if you're listening, this was not your fault. You have nothing to do with this, but that was kind of the moment that Zach's life, I think, kind of, I don't want to say started rolling downhill, to use a skating term, I guess, but it was, it's really obviously what brought their relationship to some. What's the word? Just, I don't know. It started to kind of fall apart, I guess. Like you said, he was a partier. I was a little impressed with him right at first when they had the kid, because I'm like, oh, he's stepping up, and Nina's going and kind of being in her party phase, and he's sort of, he's not happy about it, but he's like, I'm gonna take care of the kid the best I can. I loved seeing him take his kid to the skate park and like roll him around on the skateboard and hand him off to some of the other guys while he went and did a trick. Like that's a really cool bonding moment for kids and all that. But, then as you mentioned, it slips into sort of Nina being an absentee parent and accusations that Zach had been abusing Nina. She left him. They got back together. She left him again. She went and lived with her aunt and uncle. He eventually, it was kind of where she went and filed for child support. He gets pretty deep into alcoholism. That was pretty tough to watch. Toward the end, they sort of alluded to maybe he started to get his shit together. It's hard to know. They don't really go too deep into that. But I agree. Zach's progression was the hardest to watch for sure. Being behind the camera, was sort of an observer, with the exception of the times where he came in and was vulnerable with his mother and talking about his stepfather and all that. Kier was sort of the innocent one of, maybe not innocent, but he had a very innocent spirit about him. How, he very much broke the mold of what it seemed like his family expected him to behave like, being the only black kid in the crew, where he was, they showed part of where his family was saying, and he talked about, you've got a lot of white friends, but don't forget that you're black. He's like, he made it sound like, I'm not planning on forgetting that. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I think I can understand maybe as best as I can as me being a white man, but if you didn't know that, I'm a white guy. James just perked up over there like, oh, what? No shit. but the
who told you?
Yeah, you can hear it in my voice. Anyway, there was he sort of broke the mold where none of his other family members or anything were going that path, and he was skateboarding and so that was kind of fun to watch. But Zach was the tough one. Zach was the difficult one to watch. So I took that over. So I'm sorry, Brice, you were talking and I hijacked your train. So anything else you want to add on that?
Yeah. When they were out of power and his apartment was full of shit, that was scary. That was just like the ultimate downfall there. And then it turns out like he was in Milwaukee or something at the time, living with some girl that bought him a ticket.
Yeah, she was a nut, wasn't she? But apparently she went and he's still living with her as of the end of that thing. So that's cool, I guess.
I think that was a different girl.
No, Sam.
Was that?
Yeah.
Oh, no, because he went to Denver at some point. And then was that Sam the whole time?
The way my notes are written, that was Sam the whole time.
Well, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Sorry.
Travis, you better
Travis.
interrupt, sir.
I was going to say, there's 2 points there. First, it seems like Denver is a very common destination for skateboarders in the Midwest. I think it has to do with a lot of the sunlight. So I moved to Denver for a hot minute at one point in my time for snowboarding and skateboarding explicitly. So it's interesting that's when I saw that, it was fascinating.
It's year-round board sports, yeah.
But the thing I was going to say, as far as like I would say my particular, if I was going to gripe about the movie, about the documentary, like I get narrative wise and the themes that they're presenting and how the editing was with the timelines, the bouncing back and forth. At the same time, I do think it introduced some confusion. If there could have been something that could have made that a little more cohesive for me. And like, so I honestly, I can't vouch for either of your positions on what happened with what lady for Zach.
Okay.
Maybe that's intentional.
Yeah,
it might be.
Travis, anything else about the documentary you wanna unpack?
The last thing, and it comes back, we alluded to it in the title, and in a sense, we all like. There's been other spots that have been touching on it. You overtaking Brice here recently was related to
man.
it, and
usually that's your job.
It's that juxtaposition of that difference between like individual experience and collective experience is at one point in time you have this confrontation and it's part of this dialogue. I think it's in the same section really about Kier not being a black dude that skates in this community and coming from the particular community and family he comes from. And there's this point where they're talking about dealing with cops and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And his friends, and because here's the filmmaker choosing to include this line where one friend's saying like, I get it. And the other friend's like, how can you get him being a black man?
Right.
Like effectively.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, so you have them saying that, calling attention like, okay, can you or can't you understand this position?
Right.
And it's like, and then later you also at the same time have Bing saying, when he talks about why he chose to make this film, and he says, I saw a lot of myself in your story. And so on one end, he is saying at certain points, we can kind of pull from each other's experiences and we can understand maybe a little of the collective experience, but at the same time, it's going to be this very individual thing. And I like that choice. Like at first I saw the choice of him including that interaction with his two white friends that also skateboarded that were younger nonetheless. They weren't hanging out with Zach and Bing in that time, although Bing was filming obviously. I was like, oh, it's this big more social commentary is the entire focus. And he's going to say, we have to pay attention to a larger issue. But then he comes back later to ground it in the fact that there are still things we can learn from each other, even if that is not the case.
Yeah. And that's kind of a good sort of segue into the next piece. But I do want to say that I did appreciate, or I did think it was an interesting thing when, Kier being the youngest in the group and then sort of finding a new, even younger crew to hang with when the other guys started getting older and moving on. Almost, it felt to me like almost trying to hang on to the youth, but then it showed the new generation of youth in skateboarding where they didn't maybe come from the same things that these guys did. And it reminded me of like sort of the old guy at the hardcore shows. You knew I was going there, didn't you? It was like sort of wanting to stay involved there, but also looking at the younger kids and going, God, was I ever really like that? That's at least kind of the thing I took for it. The one of the things, and this was actually in the movie poster, and it was a something written with Sharpie on a skateboard that said, "This device cures heartache," which I thought was such a cool way to encapsulate what this film was. It is the thing that we are using and focusing on to I don't want to say cure, even though it said cure, but to address the pain in our lives. We are focused. We are revolving around this or gathering around it like it's a campfire and we're warming our hands on it. It's the thing that we're using to get through the difficulties that we're going through.
I think that was a really ironic shot because he had just broke the skateboard and was kind of pissed about it.
Yeah, I didn't even put that together in my head. You're right. He did.
I like writing phrases on skateboards like that is a very common tradition. It's one I never really got into as much as I was in bands and like phrases. Like you'll see part of the homage. There's this machine kills fascists.
Yeah.
Like there's a play there as well. And that many a skateboarder will know it. So I kind of want to know, was that what, and I feel that my gut instinct is to say that seeing the quality of skateboarding that was in the video, because they were all really decent skateboarders.
Yeah, they were.
And like, especially if they're getting shop sponsorship, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't strike me anyone as being inauthentic. So it's cool that that's something that they did stumble upon. It wasn't staged, right?
Yeah. I
really don't think so. So
I would agree with that. All right, so credits roll. How do we feel? What's the overarching feeling once you see that this is finally over? Matt, let's start with you, man. What was your feeling once credits roll?
Well, I mean, just like any other documentary, I always want to know more, right?
Uh-huh.
But the bottom line is that you really need a good foundation to really avoid some of the things that you go through, like alcohol abuse and a good education, people to lean on and there's always going to be a vice that you use to redirect your mind and your ways of thinking and no, it's
what was your feeling though? Like, were you like, oh, good, this thing's over, or shit, I'm glad things turned out like they? What was my personally? What was your feel?
I mean, my feeling is that these guys were doing a lot of things that I was doing when I was growing up and experienced a lot of the things that I experienced, and it just kind of reminded me of my friend group, and it was kind of nice to see, especially when at the beginning I people playing outside, doing the things that I did when I was that age, experiencing life and then
partying a little too.
Well, of course. And then, you get to the point in your life where it becomes a little more complicated, and then, you evolve into a parent and that's just things change, and, there are a lot of situations you cannot control, but you're forced to learn from.
I have in my notes here, I intended to talk to you a little bit specifically about parenthood and whatnot, but we are kind of running a little bit long, so I did skip it. So sorry, Matt. Maybe we'll do one sometime where we get into that a little bit more.
Okay.
Brice, how about you, man? How did how'd you feel, man?
How'd I feel? So credits roll, and I'm just like, wow, that was really insightful in the sense that I got to know these guys. Because for how long it had been filmed, and you get to see them grow into these new characters. Yeah. Even though they're just playing themselves. And it's like, I know I said I felt like, I felt closest to Zach in the beginning. And then towards the end, it's like, he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah.
And it's like, you type in minding the gap, and then one of the first responses, what happened to Zach? Where's he at now?
Oh yeah. People are wondering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find anything, or did you not look into it really?
The last thing I read, he was working for his dad's construction company. He's like a roofing foreman, and he's still with Sam.
Okay. So after all that, trying to get his GED, get out of roofing and all that, he's still doing roofing, huh?
That last I read,
I hope that that's
the
going well for
never
him.
lied to me. So
yeah, the internet's a very reliable source. Travis, credits
Bob
roll.
Dole made the internets.
Bob Dole. Travis, how you feeling, man? After you watch this?
In all honesty, I don't know how I dodged so many bullets in my life.
Yeah, that's fair, man.
And especially because I've seen a lot of similar stuff happen with a lot of friends. The one close friend during high school and junior high that was my age, that was my core friend through skateboarding. He is father was abusive, hated me for some reason, even though I didn't drink and I was a good student.
Probably why.
Hated me and was clearly abusive towards them. And unfortunately, he got into bad drugs. And like last I checked with his younger brother, lives on the streets. His younger brother did get into some bad stuff, and their mother committed suicide. Like I'm not even like seeing that. And like, that's my friend. And that's only one, like I said, I've got multiple friends through skateboarding that I've lost. And on one hand, I think having the absentee parent as opposed to the abusive parent, like physically abusive parent, was probably maybe better off because I had to be I had to be an adult earlier.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So for me, what I was hit with was kind of nostalgia. So they did a really good job. They started the documentary with these kids rolling down a street. Just, they weren't doing a lot of flip tricks. They weren't doing a lot of that. I don't know what the terminology for that is, but just kind of cruising, and just taking the curbs and, maybe manualing for a little while, that to me, if I could do that well, because I know that that's harder to actually do than what it looks, that would be, I mean, it looked so relaxing, which to me, I wouldn't be, because I'd fall and I'd never get back up again, because I'm a big awkward giant. But nostalgia was what my feeling was. I just felt like, whether it was the music choice or the way they filmed it toward the end, with the post-credit scenes, it was like you start to just kind of feel a like Brice mentioned, you kind of I don't want to say you become friends with them, but you kind of feel like these guys now. And so I don't know. That was sort of my feeling.
You want them to be like, you can see that they can still enjoy things. You want them to be all right.
Yeah, for sure. Right. I'm invested in your well-being now, and I want you to do well.
Because if they're all right, maybe things will work out. Like generally,
if you can do it, so can I.
Made me think about that.
Yep, for sure. All right, so let's talk about ratings. I think we could probably do a 2-part episode on this one, because I think there's a lot of things that we didn't really dig into as much as we could have, but for the sake of time and energy, let's.
I told you to tell me to shut up.
No, man, you're doing just fine. All right, so let's talk about ratings, though. So on this show, if you haven't listened, we rate our documentaries with an official Talkumentary rating. Each crew member scores the documentary on a scale of 1 to 10 items, with 1 being as bad as Zach saying, "But bitches need to get slapped sometimes." Wah, wah. And 10 being as amazing as Travis's favorite kickflip, which means we have chosen the kickflip as our item. So 1 out of 10 kickflips. Travis, let's start with you as our special guest and subject matter expert.
I clearly have a bias that hasn't been obvious from the start, so I'm leaning on a 9.
9 kickflips. What is it if you if you do a kickflip like more than 1 rotation?
They like it double, triple, quadruple. Your standard.
What's 9 spins?
Like, so what's after octuple? I got up to octuple, but I can't think of what's after.
Whatever that is.
It gets weird after.
After the 8s. No, I don't know. 900
kickflip.
Yeah.
Super.
All right. So 9 kickflips. Brice, how about you, man?
7 very good kickflips.
That's a septuple. I don't know. God damn it. Matt, how many kickflips?
I gave it an 8, which is exactly 8 more than kickflips than I can actually do in real life.
Hell yeah. I also gave it an octuple kickflip, which means the average, so the official Talkumentary rating for Minding the Gap is 8 kickflips. Very, very special thank you to Travis King for joining us tonight. We talked about talked about this really fun documentary. Brice, Matt, as always, thanks for your friendship and your conversation. I want all of you to know, James included, sitting over there in the quiet chair. I would totally disregard a no trespassing sign and climb to the top of a tall building for the perfect skate spot with any of you.
What if the building was too tall and there was just a great parking garage next to it?
I'd climb it if you needed me to climb with you.
You wouldn't get tired halfway up and just go for the parking garage?
No, I wouldn't do that. Nope. All right, so let's see. Next week, we are going to be watching a documentary in celebration of Juneteenth. We will be discussing the fun yet poignant documentary titled, Is That Black Enough For You? This 2022 documentary examines the history, craft, and legacy of African American cinema with a focus on the films released in the 1970s. Have any of you guys seen Is That Black Enough For You yet? Trav? Nope. You need to check that one out. You guys seen it?
Nope.
Yeah.
Not yet.
I watched the trailer for it and it looks freaking fun. So I'm excited to get into that one. Let's see. Everyone go check it out. It is on Netflix. Next week, God damn it, I'm stuttering here. Go out, rate and review our podcast on your favorite podcast streaming service and let us know what you think, or find us on social media. If you want to connect to us, look for @Talkumentary Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. You can email us at info.talkumentary@gmail.com. Travis, thanks again, man. Really good to have you here. I always like talking to you. I always get tired when I talk to you because I feel like you have like a fatherly voice, sort of, that just like makes me want to like just listen to you tell stories or something like that.
Man, I gotta watch out when I'm teaching in person again, man.
Yeah. Oh shit. If you were my professor, I would be in trouble, man.
Okay. I got bodily actions when I'm in person.
I'll bet you do. You spit a lot when you talk too.
That's why I stay away.
Yeah, that's why. That's why it's good that you're on a little mobile device over there. Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to any shout outs? Anything like that before we hang up for the evening?
Since it's skateboarding related, check out either of the shops in Omaha, both run by good people. There's a new shop. Definitely check out and support Central Skate Shop in Benson, run by the Jeffrey Fowler. And then there's Silo downtown. I always forget the owner's name, but Cam works there. He's a good dude in the music scene as well.
Cool.
Yeah, they'll take care of you.
So if you're a skater in the Omaha, Nebraska area, and go check out one of those shops. Travis, much love, my friend. Tell Phyllis we love her. Give that Penny a pet on the head for us. And on behalf of Brice, Matt, Travis King over there, DJ in the post-production booth, and the entire Talkumentary family, I am your host, Jeff Kolaski, and I want to thank you all for listening. I hope you keep your minds open, and I hope you're kind to each other.
Be a good human.
Make sure you mind the Gap. They're having really good sales right now.
I don't even know if it's still a store. Bye, Travis. Love you, buddy.
Bye.